Hello and welcome, connoisseurs of fine common cardboard. My name's Papa Popper, Ryan, and I'm glad to have you here today to take a look at the Brothers War set for commons that you might find in cPDH in the games you come across and cards you should consider for your decks. Now take a look and see who's in chat today. Thanks for coming along. And yeah, we're gonna get things started here. I'm gonna do a quick tuning of my audio setup here, and then we'll be good to go. For those of you in chat, if you could just give me a little thumbs up if everything is sounding crisp and clear, the music is an appropriate volume. Christopher, glad to have you here. Thanks for joining me today. Glad to have you. Okay. Everything looking and sounding good. Wonderful. All right, well, we'll get things started here, and as folks trickle in, we'll welcome them in due time. So to start things off, Brothers War is in many ways defined better by the uncommon creatures that we got than the common cards that we got. We got some powerful cards with a lot of circumstantial or situational homes. So nothing along the veins of, a card that you could play in every deck. There are a couple of them, but a lot of what we're working with are going to be very good cards in certain homes. And that is kind of, I think, the story of Brothers War in terms of the commons. And when we get into the uncommons, we start to see some really, really unique and powerful effects that we'll also explore as the stream goes on. So we're going to start from the top here using Scryfall and go through a couple of the cards that I think are likely to see play in cPDH, and perhaps some cards where they're going to power up an archetype, or cards that are going to be slam dunks in certain existing decks. So starting from the top in alphabetical order, there are a couple of things that I noticed about this set from the get-go, and one of them is going to tie into one of the uncommons, which is that there's a lot of human soldiers. And soldier is actually a lightly relevant creature type at common. There are certain synergies that actually are lord your soldiers. There's 3 cards. They're at, I believe, 2 and 3 CMC that buff up power and toughness. And there's even an uncommon commander now with a nice resilient 3/4 body for 4 that buffs up your other soldiers. So some of these cards here, this cavalry is not likely to be a really high-end, high-powerful card, but it is a 4 toughness flying creature that buffs up another soldier. That could be useful. The first card that we're going to talk about is Loran's Escape. Chris, phew, I just saw this. I was in a sick Slay the Spire run. Soldiers, you mean like the Bugler? Yeah, that's right. So there's Bugler is also an incentive to be on soldiers, but there's a variety of other things going on there too. But glad to have you here, Chris. Thanks for joining us. So for this first card that we're going to talk about is Loran's Escape. And Loran's Escape, 1 white, is going to grant something the inability to die, except to edicts, for the really low price of 1 mana, with a Scry 1 attached to it. The closest analogy for this is God's Willing, which was printed back in Theros, and this one is granting protection and Scry 1 for 1 mana. And protection does mean unblockability too, and so there is some edge case here in that this is a little bit more powerful. However, Loran's Escape isn't so much one that we're comparing to God's Willing as so much as we're adding to it. Interesting thing here is it does say target artifact or creature. So that means any target, including your opponent's. So if your opponent goes to cast a spell targeting their own thing, and you give it hexproof, you are preventing them from targeting it with spells they control, that your opponents control. So if they go to cast Ghostly Flicker, or they go perhaps Presence of Gond on a Midnight Guard, or if they go Freed from the Real, those kinds of things, or Retraction Helix, we can essentially counter that spell by making the target invalid with hexproof. The Scry one is a really nice bonus in white, because white does tend to have some problems with card advantage, and just that they don't really have a whole lot of cards that say draw more than one. They can draw at parity, but oftentimes they're not going to get you card advantage. So that Scry is really helpful in terms of just kind of evening it out our draws just incidentally as we play the game. So I think Loran's Escape is interesting. I don't know exactly what decks are going to be there's a certain deck in particular that I think Loran's Escape is going to be really, really good in, and that one is Duelist. See, CMC equals 2, type creature, O double, color equals white. Let's see, which is, Illuminator Virtuoso. So Illuminator Virtuoso is a deck that in cPDH that can kill incredibly fast, and this deck relies on a really high density of protection spells, something like 30 or 40 protection and pump spells. And the idea is that every time you target it, you're going to connive, and you're going to buff it up. So really, you just need to protect it, and every time you protect it, it's going to get bigger. And so cards like Loran's Escape help that deck move away from running some of the bad protection spells, because it does look for that density. This is really helpful. The Scrying is also great, as it can help even out that draw in that deck, or the connives, because you may connive more than once in a turn. So Loran's Escape is great, but we can kind of see this in some ways similar to Vines of Vastwood, where we're able to target our opponent's things. So definitely exciting. This is a really interesting one. It's not a huge upgrade necessarily, but granting hexproof to our opponent's stuff does make this a bit of a side grade, I would say, as some folks might say. So yeah, there's our first one, Loran's Escape. The next one that I think is likely to be exceptionally scary and good is Recommission. And Recommission is a 2-mana Unearth. Unearth is a 1 black, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield if its CMC is 3 or less. Recommission is 2 mana for the same effect, except that we can also return artifacts. If we return a creature this way, it comes in with a counter on it, thus buffing it up. Recommission is going to be really interesting because Unearth, in a sense, is powerful because it allows us to cheat on mana, and it allows us to get another ETB. Unearth also has cycling, which is another thing to consider. You can just 2 mana, draw a card, which is an upside. So a lot of the strength of Unearth is in that you are paying 1 mana for a 3 mana creature. So 1 mana, get a Phyrexian Rager back. 1 mana, get a Liliana Spectre back. 1 mana, get Militia Bugler, Tethmost High Priest. Could be Academy Wall if you were an Azorius. There's a lot of really good targets at 3 mana. And so Unearth is really powerful for that matter. What Recommission does different is that it returns an artifact. And there's some key artifacts at 3 mana that we would want to consider with this. One of them could be Cranial Plating. But it's much more likely that the usage of this card goes hand in hand with Ashnod's Altar. I don't know exactly what deck is going to go for this. Perhaps there's an Ashnod's Altar combo in the Naya Rocco Cabaretti Caterer deck, or perhaps they want to get this back, although Rocco is pretty hungry for creature-based effects that it can reuse over and over again with what's it called? So O return CMC equals, was it 4? No, so it's not a defender. Its toughness equals 4. Type artifact, rarity common. Maybe its toughness equals 5? No, toughness equals 3. There it is, Aegis Automaton. Yeah. So Aegis Automaton is one of the, it's kind of a combo card in a sense in Rocco, in that it allows you to reuse Rocco, but it also allows you to reuse initiative and all sorts of other stuff. And it's not the only way to bounce things. You can also bounce your creatures with Core Skyfisher or with Horned Kavu. And so ETB creatures, as well as just creatures that you can find with Rocco, are usually preferable, but something like Recommission could find a home there, and this is a powerful effect for the artifacts that we care about. Could also get a Whisper Silk Cloak back, so definitely keep an eye on this one. This could also play in maybe like the original Wrath Capuchin deck, which is an Azorius artifact based blink deck, or Retraction Helix, whichever way you build it. This could also potentially go in the new, there's a dragon, rarity, uncommon, type dragon, type creature. I guess we just do that. Rarity, uncommon, and then it was color equals blue. So Renari is another one. So Renari paired with some sort of white background allows you to cast artifact spells as though they had flash. And so this one could also play into there, where it's going to give you a way to essentially say, yeah, my combo pieces are gone, and then bring them back with Recommission and dunk on everyone. So Recommission, definitely cool. Those are two of the white cards that I think are really, really high likelihood of seeing play, but there's a couple more. And the last two here are Scrapwork Cohort. And I wouldn't say that this card is super high quality, but it does do something really interesting. And that is that it unearths in white, and it's producing a body every time it enters the battlefield, as well as itself. Unearth is surprisingly relevant right now because Unearth gives you haste. So when your opponent, or an opponent, or you sweep the board, you can then unearth on your turn or after the sweeper to reclaim the monarch and the initiative. And if your opponents don't have access to haste themselves, it means that you are likely to sit on the initiative and the monarch for an additional 2 turns, which is kind of, that's bonkers. It means you could draw 2 cards. You're going to draw 2 cards probably. You might even draw a third if you've gained the initiative for the first time, because you're going to get a land. If you get the initiative again, then you may be able to buff something up or scry 2. There's a lot of ways that Unearth is really powerful, but it's the colors that are interesting here. Scrapwork Cohort, being in white, gives us things that we can loot away. And there's a couple decks that are just very excited about this. The first one is going to be Amber plus Veteran Leader. And Amber Gristle O'Maul, pardon me. 4 mana, 3/3 haste. Whenever it attacks, you discard your hands and you draw that many cards based on the number of people you're attacking. And Amber is turning out to be a really powerful aggro commander, especially when partnered in Boros. And the reason is that Boros gives us all these things we can do with our graveyard that tend to be kind of aggressive. Prismatic Strands, Rally the Peasants. So if we just go rarity common O flashback, ID equals Boros, we're going to see what I'm talking about. And there's a reason why in Pauper that Boros is such an aggressive color, and that's because you've got Faithful Saluting, Battle Screech, Prismatic Strands, Rally the Peasants. It just kind of goes on. And so Boros Bully, for example, was a long-time staple of Pauper, and essentially the Amber decks helped bring that and port it over into cPDH. But we really didn't have enough things to do in the graveyard that were reasonable prior to these new Unearthed cards. So let's talk about the ones that we had before. Battle Screech was good. I think that these Abandon the Post cards are actually kind of interesting because making people not block is quite good when you're just trying to push damage. Yeah, but Battle Screech, Faithful Saluting, Homestead Courage, Marshalling Cry, Prismatic Strands, Rally the Peasants. These are all cards that we're excited about in that deck. So when we go back here and look at Scrapwork Cohort, this is doing a lot of things we want. The first one is that it's coming back from the graveyard and essentially makes it so that Amber, when she discards cards, if this is one of them, you're not really discarding this card. You are going to get it back. It's not going to be permanent, but it's gonna come back, which means that we don't really get punished for discarding our cards, right? We really want to be able to run Amber out and immediately start pitching cards into the graveyard. A classic example of this is like when you look at Faithful Saluting. Faithful Saluting is really at its most powerful when the card reads 1 red, draw 2 cards, flashback for 3, draw 2 cards. That's a busted Magic card. When Faithful Saluting sucks is when you are discarding cards that do not get recast again, because then Faithful Saluting is very much card negative and only goes parity when you flash it back on the flashback. So overall, you're still down 1 card, and you get to cheaply see more, and you can do it later on when that's useful. But Scrapwork Cohort basically means that we're not really getting punished when we're playing Amber for putting our hand in the graveyard when we attack. The other thing is the 1/1 Soldier creature token. And for one thing, it's an artifact. It's a soldier. These things probably don't matter so much, but it is a creature token. Chris Lively says Battle Screech. Yeah, that's why it was banned in Modern. Give too many grave spells. Exactly. Yeah, in Modern, when it meant pitching like Vengevines and drawing off of dredge cards and just that kind of stuff, it was oppressive. It was too good. It was enabling too many busted things when it was like 1 mana pitch 2 Phoenixes into the yard, that kind of stuff, gut shot, or like that kind of thing, and then bring back these Phoenixes. That was really good. So yeah, token. It's an artifact creature token. It's a soldier, but it's also just a token, and that is interesting because when we look at Inspiring Leader as one of the backgrounds, this gives all of our creature tokens +2/+2 when we have our commander out. So the other deck that this could potentially go into, I'm not saying a guarantee here because I think this is less of a slam dunk here than it is in Amber, is gut decks. Gut decks, because that Inspiring Leader, they want to be creating creature tokens a lot of the times because they're buffing them up with gut. So this one's really good in that way. It's also something that you're getting 4 bodies essentially on it, and that's a really good rate in a sense. Aside from the fact that it's 4 mana, it's a good rate in that you can play this 3/1 for 4, sacrifice the 1/1, go to attack and hit somebody, and then next turn you can be like attacking in with this 3/1, and when it dies, then we can bring it back with Unearth. The token's going to get buffed up to 3/3, and we can charge in for damage. So I think that this card, Scrapwork Cohort, is really cool there. The other place, and perhaps the most slam dunk place, is actually in Quintorius decks. So for those of you who don't know Quintorius is a Boros commander that buffs up our spirits. Whenever one or more cards leave our graveyard, we're going to get a 3/2, which is technically a 4/1 because of Quincy. Nick, a lot of people call Quintorius Quincy. That's just a little slang. Quintorius also suffered from not having enough good cards that made our cards leave the graveyard. You have to stretch a little bit. I've played this deck quite a bit. Both Clay and I have tried a lot with Quincy, and we were trying when the meta was significantly more siloed in combo, and so it wasn't really ever that viable because somebody could either counter it when it resolved as a 5-mana commander in a colors that don't ramp that well and don't draw cards and don't recover as good, and just counter it, or they could allow it to resolve and then kill it. And it was pretty punishing, and it had a very high delta of performance. But when you're making 4/2s, this is like Tormod's ability, but the things that you're getting back are much bigger. We have a couple of different things in the chat here. Christopher saying, Quincy, my boy. That is absolutely right. Quincy is such a boss. I love this this elephant. The best elephant, yes. Chris says, are any of the new Unearthers good enough for Liara? That's a really great question. Let's go take a look at Liara. So Liara is a 5-mana commander, 5/3, pretty big, human soldier. And when it attacks, you're going to exile X cards off the top of your library, where X is the number of players you're attacking at the same time. And then those things get reduced by their cost reduced by X. So optimal scenario is that we flip cohort off of Liara and we pay 1 mana for it. That seems pretty good. I don't know whether Liara, we might like this enough simply by virtue of the fact that it's 2 cards on 1 and it's 4 bodies on 1, and it's essentially 1 mana. So there's a very common world where you flip 3 cards, you cast a mana rock for free, either for 2 or for 3, which is for free, and then you use that mana rock to tap it and cast your scrapwork cohort, which actually is pretty interesting. So, and the 2 bodies means you can attack 2 different targets to keep that Liara Portier value going. So yeah, perhaps it does have a home there. But I would also default to the judgment of Puzzle Box when it comes to Liara. Puzzle Box is one of the people who's done a lot of really cool work on that deck and brought it to the DDB, the deck database. So yeah, that's an option. But again, I think its most obvious homes are going to be in Amber, in Veteran deck, Veteran Soldier. So Amber Soldier and Quintorius, and then Gut, Inspiring Leader as well. So yeah, we'll back off that. There's another one, and we're not going to talk about it too long because this card is really, like, we're going to play it for the same reason. This is just another creature that we can unearth. And it's not like it's amazing, as a creature in general, but it's just that it's a card that we can cast from the graveyard. These decks already have like a plenty of card quality in them. And so just making Amber into this like card draw engine where all of our cards are castable from our graveyard or our hand is really appealing. It also has a little bit of life gain, and it's a 4/4. So there's a lot to like here. Again, just the unearthing for haste is really powerful. So we'll give an honorable mention to Warlords Elite. I think a 4/4 for 3 could potentially be good enough in some sort of an aggro deck, and it would certainly go in any soldier deck that comes up. I don't know that the soldier deck necessarily is going to make the cut for cPDH, just because, I mean, it is in white and blue, and so blue is going to give us a card draw. So maybe it does. Maybe it's in some sort of aggro or tempo kind of a shell. That would be really interesting to see. But regardless, this will definitely go there. You can tap treasure tokens. You can tap Power Stone tokens. There's all sorts of cool stuff you can do here. Or creatures. So if you cast like Rally the Peasants and then you go Warlords Elite, then, you're able to do that all at once. And then the last one is Power Stone Engineer, which when it dies, you're going to create a Power Stone token. That kind of 2-mana body that makes a ramp piece could potentially have some play. Moving into blue, we have a pretty big slam dunk here, and this is where we run into one of our first and one of the only almost universally playable blue cards. And that is Philology Archaeologist. And this is a really great improvement on Augur of Bolas. Augur of Bolas looks at the top 3. You're going to get to put an instant or a sorcery into your hand. It's a 1/3. It's also a wizard. But Augur, as many of you have probably found, is putting those cards to the bottom in a fair number of cases. This says non-creature, non-land. So what's really key about this is that you can hit mana rocks. You can also hit auras. So if you have wanted to avoid playing Augur in a deck because you don't want to, for example, put Freed from the Real to the bottom, Philology Archaeologist allows you to actually take that card. And it is going to be visible. It is going to be face up, whereas Augur is all private information, except for, I believe, except for the card that you take, Augur. Yep, you reveal it. So either way, the ones that go to the bottom are the ones that they're not seeing. The other thing about Philology Archaeologist is that if you don't hit anything, or if the size of the body happens to matter more, you can just make her into a 1/4, and that's great. So this one here goes in so many decks. One of the things that you probably heard me harp on is that in the cPDH meta, the current cPDH meta, this much more diverse and diversified meta, the presence of a lot of creatures in your deck that are going to act as draw spells or card selection is really useful because they discourage aggression. They act as roadblocks or speed bumps later on for damage. And in decks that really do want this kind of card advantage, maybe they're digging for a combo piece or interaction of some sort, a card like this does a lot of things. We can also flicker it, which is great. The other thing is that if you read the specific text of the card, you're going to mill 3 cards, and then you're just going to put one of those cards into your hand, which means that your opponent cannot actually target the thing that we are putting back into our hand. They have to interact with this with the mill. So the mill happens, then after the mill they can do something, but then you could just choose something else, which means that in some cases they're not going to be able to completely deny you card advantage with this card. The fact that it mills also is really important because in blue this is going to help feed cards like Logic Knot, Treasure Cruise. It'll put cards like Deep Analysis into the graveyard. Philology Archaeologist has an even bigger impact on 60-card Pauper. But here in cPDH, this one is going to go in Sailor's Bane as a slam dunk. It is going to go in, and actually in Sailor's Bane, there may be times where we choose not to put a card back into our hand, even though we could, because we just want to crank out our Sailor's Bane sooner. There will be instances like that. This also goes in Crackling Drake. This could easily go in Nightveil Predator. Nightveil Predator in the past hasn't played Augur of Bolas because there are a lot of cards that we can't actually pick up with Augur. It's very unreliable. But Philology Archaeologist can get Cranial Plating, it can get auras, it can get mana rocks, it can get all those things, while also being a body that is going to eat edicts, speed bump, and just generally kind of discourage aggression. So this one here, gonna go on a ton of decks. The ones I listed there are just like scratching the ice, scratching the tip of the iceberg here. One of the other ones actually that this could go into as well, if you were looking to, yeah, I mean this could also go into ghost decks, because in ghost decks this reads, 2 mana, pitch 3 into the yard, get one of them back. Actually, with Ghost, Tormod Ghost, this is great. I just thought of that, because you pitch the cards into the yard, and then you get one of them back with the Philology Archaeologist. That triggers Tormod, and then you can attack with Ghost, and because they were put there from your library, you can get another one of them back, which makes another zombie. So this is actually very good in that context. So, yep, this one is going to see a lot of play. You're going to see a lot of this card. The next card that I had on my list is Urza's Rebuff. And this is a card that's not, if I were to guess, going to see an enormous amount of play, but it will see play in certain decks. Urza's Rebuff is acting as both a fog and a counterspell, and in control decks in blue that really want that flexibility, where sometimes they kind of wish that counterspell were just kind of like removal or a fog or something like that, this is going to be there for you, and that's really good. So decks that I expect to play this in, I've already been looking at adding it to Murmuring Mystic. Crackling Drake could play it as well, because tapping down the creatures could also allow you to get in with the Crackling Drake and kill somebody. So this one is exciting to me in that case. 3 mana counterspells, traditionally we don't want to lean too heavy into them. There's only a couple that you can really play in a deck at any given time, and still be efficiently addressing your opponent's threats. So this one, kind of goes hand in hand with cards like Dream Fracture or Fairy Trickery, or you find the villain's lair, that kind of thing. So Urza's Rebuff, definitely excited about this one for a couple of select decks. Moving on from there, we're going to get down to a couple of black creatures that I'm excited about. The first one is Gixian Infiltrator. And Gixian Infiltrator is the very same card as Bloodbriar. Bloodbriar is just 1 more mana and has 2 more toughness. But the text is the same. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And this isn't game breaking. This is just a good card in certain decks. The decks that I see this being good in are potentially like a Slimefoot deck. It could be good in some sort of Legamos type deck. It's going to be good in any deck that really wants to sacrifice things. So this actually is pretty fantastic in Mayhem Devil, because we have blood tokens, we have treasure tokens. So you could actually have a turn where you play out Gixian Infiltrator. Say you draw it late, and a card like this later on is actually generally not as good. You really want, like Aristocrat decks oftentimes want all their pieces out at once. But the way that Mayhem Devil is built is to stock up these permanents in play that we can then sacrifice at whim to get a lot of triggers. This is a trigger. So if we top deck this and we have 3 treasures and, say we have 2 blood tokens, we can sacrifice all of those and immediately turn it manalessly, turn this into a 7/6. And that's not to mention the fact that we also have lands like Grixis Panorama and Jund Panorama and Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse that can also trigger this because it's hitting permanents. So this is really similar to Mortician Beetle. The thing with Mortician Beetle, and the reason we don't play it in that deck, is because we're not actually sacrificing our creatures that often. We do have sacrifice effects in the deck that do make it pretty sweet when you go Fleshbag Marauder and everybody sacrifices a creature and then you get your Mortician Beetle big. But this actually plays better into the strategy where we're actually just focusing on our permanents, the ones we have control over, instead of thinking about everybody's creatures. So Gixian Infiltrator, great in Mayhem Devil, also potential in Slimefoot the Stowaway. You could also play this in the new Skyfisher Spider deck, which we're going to talk about that card. That is likely to be one of my next brew videos. I'm very bullish on this card. This could go in there as well, although I think that the sacrifice is a little bit more incidental in that deck. It could go in Scarland Thrinax if you're doing some sort of like a mid-range plan. So yeah, in general, another card that's good. I'm glad we have a duplicate of it, and it's exciting to think about some of the homes. Oh, speaking of homes, the last one is Garna. Garna, Bloodfist of Keld. Garna is built around having instant speed sack effects that allow us to sacrifice our creatures so that once they've done their damage, we can draw cards. Or if somebody tries to sweep our board, they all die and they deal a bunch of damage. This is great in a Garna deck, and that's really exciting. So the other thing, of course, that Gixian has going for it is that it's just black. And so in 60 card, there's a possibility that this allows us to play that Bloodbriar effect in just a Rakdos deck, for example. Chris says, I would love a brew stream or deck list video for Garna. Oh, well, just so happens, Chris, that I brewed the first build of Garna Bloodfist of Keld while I was recording. And I did it with Brewbear, another esteemed deck builder who helped build that. And the iteration that we currently have of the deck is actually quite similar to where we started with it. There were a couple of cards we missed, and there's a couple of more cards that are coming out that I'm interested in. But Garna is a powerhouse, very powerful aggro deck. Yeah, so maybe the answer, the only thing is that the recording that I've got is quite long, and so I'm a little anxious about releasing it based on that. I may just do a deck tech where I explain all the card choices, but it's really powerful. I have there's actually a game that we played recently, which I will pull up here. YouTube, that I played with Garda, and I don't know if it's been uploaded yet, so I will take a look. But basically in the video, I dealt something like 28 damage over the course of a single turn using Garna. Doesn't look like I have posted that yet, so it's just kind of waiting to be released. So Chris says, I've watched 3-hour-long vids for deck techs. Yours can't be that bad. It's not 3 hours long. That's a good point. And really, part of the fun of some of the videos we do here with the live building is in part the interaction, that's going on, the banter and the back and forth, discussing why the cards are in there. So if you really want to understand why the cards are in there, those videos are really good. And you really get to see that painful decision making about how do you get down to 100 cards. And a deck like Garna, it is very close to being on the same level of like pain as building Mayhem Devil was. So maybe I'll post that one. I appreciate the encouragement. So moving on from Gixian Infiltrator is a pretty obvious one that I think many of you identified as good, and that is Overwhelming Remorse. This card, in my opinion, is not a black staple spell. However, it will go in a lot of black decks. The reason it's not a staple is that it does have a limitation on it, and that you have to be playing a lot of creatures. And by a lot, I mean I think you would need to be above 20 creatures ideally like 25 or more. A really good home for this would be Xiaodun, or Xiaohudun, where they're playing a lot of creatures so that they can reuse them with Tortex. They're also dredging. The other deck that Overwhelming Remorse goes really well in is Corpse Augur. It's also a good home in Passageway Seer. A lot of these mid-range black decks are actually kind of creature heavy because the card quality in black is so high that a lot of times we just want bodies that do something when they ETB. So you're playing cards that you can reuse with Tortured Existence. In general, a lot of black decks are going to want this, but not all of them. Good example is you're not going to play this in Ghost, Ghost Tormod, or Gormod as it's sometimes called. Toast is the other name. You're not going to play this there unless you built it around a creature. If there is actually a version of Gormod that does play Tortured Existence with creatures, and that is very powerful in of its own right. But this one does have a deck building requirement to it. Mayhem Devil could play this as well. The fact that it's exiling a creature or a planeswalker could end up making this even more relevant than it currently is. So very powerful. It's instant speed. If this is even 3 mana, it's good. A card that I like to play is called let's see. That was not what I was looking for. How do we go back? There we go. Is Ob Nixilis's Cruelty. So Ob Nixilis's Cruelty, 3 mana, instant speed, -5/-5. Exile that creature if it dies. This is basically kind of, this kills almost anything, and then it exiles it. And I recently learned just like how good that exiling was, because there are decks like Rocco that have really, really significant ability to bring back their combo creatures or their value creatures or their tutor creatures if they are not exiled. So Cruelty is really good for that reason. And Overwhelming Remorse is the same thing, except that it's even more unconditional. And someday, if we get Planeswalkers, which I think we will someday, this hitting Planeswalkers will be very significant. Very significant. Okay. The last one is going to be kind of an honorable mention because it really has a narrow use case as well. Ravenous Gigamole is going to mill 3 and return a creature card from your graveyard to your from the ones that were milled to your hand. These effects, now that I'm thinking about it again, actually do work really, really well with Ghost and Tormod. And it's making me think that perhaps we have the tools now for a good alternative to the Tormod Ghost deck that we currently see played, which is, yeah. And that is because this is getting us both card advantage, really significant card advantage actually, because we're milling 3, we get a creature back, and then we attack with Ghost, and we return one of the cards that we milled back to our hand. That's 2 cards drawn, and it's 2 triggers with Tormod. So Ravenous Gigamole definitely is interesting, but the first home that doesn't take building a new deck for this is Combo Sir Conrad, where we're milling things into the graveyard, and then we get a creature back. It's going to leave the graveyard. It's going to trigger Sir Conrad. And then the other one is potentially Xiaohudun, because the commander has stapled onto it. Basically, take a black card from your graveyard and bring it back into your hand. So Ravenous Gigamole is good in that context too, especially because it can be reused. It also has the benefit of, hey, if you don't hit something that you want to bring back, or if you just want it to be bigger, you can just choose not to bring a card back, and it becomes a 3/4, which is good. So that one's definitely solid. Oh, and I said this is going to be the last black card. I totally lied. There are 2 more that we're going to talk about. The first one is Clay Revenant. Clay Revenant, 1 mana, 1/2, enters the battlefield tapped. You can return it from your graveyard to your hand, at instant speed. This is the same thing as Sanitarium Skeleton, except that it comes into play tapped and it's an artifact. And having more of these has potential to enable some pretty cool loops, but I don't know that it's anything infinite, but it's something that you can get a lot of triggers for. This would also be a card that would go in a, in a Gormod creature-based version where you could get zombie triggers off of Skeleton. Something like maybe you would play discard effects like Dahada's Ploy, where you could pitch the Skeleton or the Revenant into the graveyard, flash it back to get a zombie, and then return Sanitarium Skeleton to get another zombie. This one's definitely, this Clay Revenant, though, has a certain additional use case, which is in Armix decks. And Armix says when it attacks, you can discard a card and kill something, basically. And it's reading the number of artifacts in your graveyard plus the artifacts you control when it tries to figure out how much damage it's going to deal or how much conditional -X. And a card like Sanitarium or Clay Revenant is not only great to discard because we can bring it back, which means that Armix can become a 3-mana murder every single turn, but it's also an artifact, which means it's buffing up that effect. We can also just play it out if we need to have that artifact in play, but this is a very cool card for that reason. And then the last black card that we're going to talk about is one of the cards that I think is actually one of the few other cards that's an actual staple. And some folks are going to disagree with me on this, but I think that Scrapwork Rager is really good. Scrapwork Rager is Phyrexian Rager for 1 more mana. It's an artifact and it has Unearth. It's not terribly mana efficient, but it's doing something that in context is very useful. That context is that it is 2 bodies and that it is 2 cards. The reason the bodies matter is because a lot of black decks are loaded up on the Mass Edict creatures. And with these Mass Edict creatures, you often don't really want to be in a position where, say you have a good creature in play that you really like, say it's your commander, and you play Fleshbag Marauder, and your opponent goes, kill your Fleshbag Marauder, make you sacrifice your Rager, or make you sacrifice your commander. That can be really punishing. And a card like Rager actually gives us something that we're comfortable sacrificing. So cards that we tend to see sacrificed in black decks are Virus Beetle, which makes everybody discard, Burglar Rat, discard, Elderfang Disciple, discard, could be Rotting Rats, could be a Liliana Spectre, though a lot of times the flying makes it so that you don't sacrifice it because you really want that. But you start to kind of run out of cards that are like generically good, that are cheap, that you're happy to sacrifice. So Scrapwork, Rager is giving us that effect where we can just play it out, draw our card, do some stuff with it. Later on, we can sacrifice it to one of our Mass Edict effects. And a lot of these black decks, a lot of mine are running, between 4 and 6 of that effect. But there's the other element of it, and that is Unearth. And we talked about Unearth with the Boros cards, but I'll tell you, I've already had a chance to steal the initiative in the Monarch after sweeping the board or after somebody else swept the board with Unearth creatures. And it's a huge swing, huge swing. Unearth is uncounterable. That's really big. So it's uncounterable, draw a card. And then if somebody has the initiative of the Monarch and somebody clap the board, or you clap the board, you go and you take it, and they have to play a creature after you've drawn your card and gained the initiative, and then they have to attack and actually get in at you. So best case scenario, is that you gain the initiative of the Monarch and you never give it up again. So Scrapwork, Rager has enormous utility there. I'm really excited to unearth this and then cast Fleshbag Marauder. Although a lot of times I want to put the Fleshbag Marauder in the graveyard because it's then I can reuse it. But that is a thing I can do that insulates me a little bit against having to sacrifice whatever I actually care about. So, oh, and it's also an artifact, so you can tap it for Network Terminal, which is oftentimes in the mid-range decks that this would be played in. So, enough waxing poetic about this card, but I really like it, and I'm excited to play with it. Wasn't there also an Unearth card in black? No, that's the only one. Okay, so on to red. The first one, and something that's been talked about quite a bit, this isn't going to be new for anyone, but Bitter Reunion is just thrilling, or sorry, Tormented Voice, as in it's a sorcery speed, draw, discard 1, draw 2. This has the added benefit of a couple of things. It's an enchantment, which means that if you pair it with white, you can actually get this back over and over again with cards like Monk Idealist that can get it back. And that's some really nice movement through your cards. It also has the ability to put itself into the graveyard, giving haste to everything you have. So this has a lot of applicability in 60 card, actually, because of a couple of reasons. The fact that it is both an enchantment and that it puts itself into the graveyard might mean that a deck could start playing Unholy Heat with this, because it's a unique permanent type in the graveyard, and Unholy Heat's a really powerful card. The haste is also relevant, so this is going to find its home in a lot of different decks. But I think the best deck for it is going to be one in cPDH that can get it back from the graveyard with something like Monk Idealist, a deck that's built around auras or enchantments, things of that nature. The haste is great. I could see playing this in a Quincy deck where I can pop it, give my spirits haste, and then clap in for a bunch of damage while keeping card neutral with it. It's not instant speed. You do lose that, but I think that the upside is worth it. The other 60 card application that I'm excited about is in Reanimator. This card could be really gross. In a lot of cases, the way that the rituals work out in Reanimator, you have like 1 or 2 extra mana, and so if you're playing this out and pitching your Ulamog's Crusher into the graveyard, you don't actually have to have Dragon's Breath to give it haste. And giving Ulamog's Crusher haste in 60 card Pauper is the one thing that makes Reanimator worth it. And that is that you blow up your opponent's lands before they can use them to kill your Ulamog's Crusher. So it's very similar to like the Emrakul thing, where it's like, if I do get this out, you are going to lose enough permanence that you'll never be able to recover. And that's really why Ulamog's Crusher is kind of the best creature you can reanimate. But this pitching and drawing cards on rate, and then also giving haste is just great. This could potentially be a very game-winning card in a lot of time. So Bitter Reunion's good. The next one is going to be Dwarven Forge Chanter. This is just another prowess creature for 2 mana, but it has Ward 2, which is great. This is probably going to go into Balmor Battle Mage Captain. Because it's basically going to have double prowess. The Ward 2 means there's going to be punishment for trying to kill it. And it's a wizard. So you can see in Balmor, if you're playing Path of Ancestry, you do get some bonus there. I don't think it'll make its way into a ton more decks. Balmor is probably the best one, but this is kind of continuing the stream, or the string of cards that have a very good conditional home. I've talked a little bit with Matt Edwards about Excavation Explosion, and Excavation Explosion is essentially an improvement on It's a 0/2/0 damage. O treasure. Can't remember the name of the card. It's from the Forgotten Realms. Improvised weaponry. So 3 mana, 2 damage to any target. Create a treasure token. Whereas this one is you actually create a Power Stone token, and it's dealing 3 damage to any target. So this one has a home there. This is I like the flexibility of it. It's got a home in Swordjack, definitely. I don't know that it'll find a whole lot more because it is sorcery speed, but it's pretty cool that this card is essentially, like, you can see this as 3 mana rock that enters the battlefield tapped and does 3 damage to anything. This is kind of how this card reads. So if you think of Meteorite, 5 mana, enters the battlefield, deals 2 to anything. You can tap it immediately, make 1 of any color. This is kind of similar, except it deals more damage. And the mana isn't as flexible in terms of what you can use it on or when you can use it. But it is dealing a similar or more damage. And it can be recovered over and over again. You could loop this using something like a pneumatic wall, get it back and create power stones over and over again. So definitely a cool card. Not going to see play in a ton of decks, but there are a couple of good homes. Goblin Blast Runner is just a good magic card for a popper. cPDH, not so much. But a 3/2 Menace is basically Delver of Secrets. As long as you've sacrificed something. So this one here, 60 cards, going to be great. I don't think beyond that it will be super amazing. You might play it in Garna, but Garna doesn't really care about the quality of its creatures. It really just wants more bodies. That's it. Because the creatures, if they block them, they're going to draw cards. If they don't, then they get hit by it. So it's like a weird form of making it hard to block. So we've got, I think, 1 more card in red. Pardon. 2 more cards in red. And the first one is Mishra's Juggernaut. And this is going to be played in the same decks we were talking about before for the same reason. It is a card that we can cast from our graveyard, which makes Amber an even bigger draw spell, basically. You know, if Amber reads, you attack 3 players, say you pitch 3 cards, and 2 of them have Unearth, then essentially what you've done is you've discarded 1 to draw 3. That's a really powerful effect to do every single turn. This also has evasion with trample, which is awesome, and it's an artifact. So same reason as before, it's going to go in Quincy. It's going to go in Amber. Could go in some gut decks as well. And then we have Scrapwork Mutt, which is a good improvement on like Immerstrom Raider and some of the ETB draw discard. This one here is Rummaging, but the Unearth is really what's exciting about this. So ETB, we're going to Rummage, and then we can Unearth and Rummage again. But coming back with haste is great. Being castable from the graveyard is great. This is another one that we're going to play. So now that we're done with red, we're going to move on to green. And green has its first good one here in Argothian Opportunist. And this one may find home in other decks that aren't the one I'm thinking of, but the most immediate home for this one is in Temur Sabertooth. Temur Sabertooth is a commander that allows you to return creatures to your hand over and over and over again as a way to generate enormous amounts of value while also protecting your commander. And the relevance of this is that we're creating a Power Stone, and that Power Stone can't be used to cast creatures, which is most of the deck, but it can be used to activate TST, and that is really good. The ability to make enough Power Stones that you can start to activate TST more times just turns into more cards, because when you have a card like Elvish Visionary and you start looping Elvish Visionary over and over again, you're going to draw a ton of cards. So Argothian Opportunist, great fit for TST in particular. I don't know where else it would go necessarily. This is another one of those cards where it's like, damn, that is so good for a specific deck. But beyond that, don't really know. I'm going to take a moment here. We're going to take a quick pause and a break to just thank you for being here today or tonight and for enjoying the stream. If you are enjoying what you see here and you're having a good time, you like the content, throw it a like. Just go click on that little thumbs up button. And if you want to see more of this kind of content, hit subscribe and help us get to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Once we get there, there's a whole bunch of things that we're going to be able to do. And I'm really excited for us to hit that benchmark. We're creeping towards it ever so surely. So yeah, and thank you for your time today. So the other green card that we're looking at here is going to be Gaia's Gift. I am not as bullish on this card as some people are, but it is a good card. There's a lot of text here, a lot of relevant text. The +1/+1 counter is oftentimes going to be relevant. If you have a 2/2 commander, like say Witherbloom Apprentice, this turning it into a 3/3 means that we can activate Pestilence, Crypt Rats, Evankar's Justice, Eyeblight's Massacre. All those cards, we can use them and Witherbloom doesn't die. It's also getting Hexproof, Indestructible, Reach, and Trample. The Reach could be surprisingly useful for protecting Initiative or Monarch, or blocking a Crackling Drake. The Trample is going to be relevant in certain decks that are using this to protect their commander in a sort of like combat damage sense. Hexproof and Indestructible is actually, in a lot of ways, like more powerful than some of the other protection spells we have in green, because it's also preventing us from dying to Pestilence or Crypt Rats. And that's quite good. It's one hold off, but it's kind of one thing holding it back is that it's 2 mana, and we have a lot of good green 1 mana protection spells. But when I say a lot, it's really 4 cards. There's Snakeskin Veil, Vines of Vastwood, there's Ranger's Guile, and then there's one other, Tamio's Safekeeping. So ostensibly Gaia's, I suppose you could also say a Void Fate, but a Void Fate is not super flexible. It only hits instants and auras. Does not stop an Oubliette, because Oubliette is an enchantment, not an aura. But Gaia's Gift does a lot. Hexproof and Indestructible, buffing it up with a counter, giving it some keywords temporarily. It's just that it's 2 mana. So, you know, this is a great card in like Herd Baloth, because the counter is going to make a 4/4. For those of you that don't know Herd Baloth is a total Chad. Every time you put a counter on him, you make a 4/4 beast creature token. So this is actually really busto in Herd Baloth. We're going to make a 4/4. We're going to get some good keywords. Yeah, we're going to save our creature. So Gaia's Gift is going to be best in decks that don't already have an existing protection color. So if you're in black-green, for example, you may or may not be playing the black protection spells. And when I say protection, I mean Undying Evil, Undying Malice, Feign Death, Armor of Shadows, but actually particularly the ones that bring it back for another ETB. But in a deck where you really just want your creature to not be targetable, say, a good example would be like maybe Wilson, Wilson with a non-white or blue background, then gift is great, because you really don't want the Wilson to die and come back. It's got auras on it, and you want to protect those. You want to protect it, and this gives you another way to do that. So this will see home in some play, or it'll have a home in some decks, but it won't be. It will not be an auto include in every green deck. We're gonna give an honorable mention to Wasteful Harvest. This one being 3 mana, instant speed. This is like Impulse. This is 3 mana, look 5, take one of those cards. This card could actually be used in Tortured Existence decks as well, like maybe a Tormod Halana deck, where this actually allows you to find Tortured Existence. That is so important. So it could actually be in 60-card Tortured decks as well, while also giving us a trigger for a card leaving the graveyard. Instant speed is also relevant. Possibly you could do some sort of like Reanimator kind of thing, where person goes to exile your graveyard, or somebody goes to exile your graveyard, and you mill 5, and then get one of the cards back. So yeah. Next one is going to be Energy Refractor, and for those of you who are savvy on combo, you're going to see exactly why this card is going to be scary, and that is that it is essentially the same thing as Prismite, but better. Prismite enables certain infinite mana combos by turning colorless mana into colored mana, so that you can chain off combo cards and win the game. So Prismite's not coming up here. It's being slow. There we go. 2 mana, 2/1, add a mana of any color by paying 2. So it's like bad mana fixing. But when you're making Ashnod alter mana, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Energy Refractor is better because it's not a creature, so it doesn't die to removal. It draws a card. That's it. It's just great. This is going to be a slam dunk in basically in Dargo Kesket, and potentially anything else that is doing Ashnod's Altar, Thermopod type stuff. You could potentially also play it in Cormella to enable you to do different things with the mana that aren't red and black. Because in the Cormella, you consume the black with Exhume or with Demonic Gifts. So maybe it's giving you something other than blue and red, potentially. So yeah, watch out for this one. Adapting to this in the meta with some of the combo decks that can abuse this, I recommend playing a Braid, and considering other modal forms of Artifact Hate that do multiple things. So maybe the new there's another card here that you could consider running as well that is modal sorcery. There we go. And that is Smash to Dust. I'm not huge on this card, but with that new Refractor in the meta, it's better that you run a Destroy Artifact effect that has other effects on it than just run a dedicated Artifact Destruction card. Because artifacts, there are some good ones. Altar, Cranial Plating, Whisper Silk Cloak, maybe Sylvok Lifestaff, Bonder's Ornament. There are good ones out there, but generally they don't warrant inclusion in your deck, eating up a slot. And so what I like about Dust to Dust is that it's also dealing 1 damage to each opponent's creature, or in weird cases, you might be able to destroy like a Pneumatic Wall or a Cemetery Gate if somebody's playing that, but destroy a creature with Defender. You could destroy a Basilica Guard with this as well. It's not common that you're going to use a second mode, and but this is a card that has other utility other than just destroying an artifact, and that's why it's something that I think I could justify in a deck. I think it's going to be good in Torwauki in particular. Okay, on to artifacts. None of these are... There's only one of these other cards that I'm bullish on, and that is Stone Retrieval Unit. And that's because this is another card that you can play in TST. You can play this in Temur Sabertooth, bounce it back to your hand, play it again, creating that Power Stone every single time. The cool thing about it too is that because it's an artifact, this can actually begin to pay for itself. So if you go Stone Retrieval Unit, make a Power Stone, pay 2, return it, play it out again, you get another token. So this on the next turn was just like absolutely bananas. Like if you play this and you get a bunch of Power Stones, so quite good. Starts to pay for its own cost. The last one that we're going to look at is Tokasha's Digstite. This one's gotten a lot of heat. A lot of people excited about this. It's a good card. It's an untapped, colorless producing land with Surveil. Admittedly, we have had cards like this before, and I don't think that they were very good. The campuses are a really good example of that. But the campuses always come into play tapped. And it's also 4 mana, or technically 5, because it's attached to a land. 5 mana to scry 1. This is 3 mana Surveil 1. Surveil is quite a bit better than scry in a lot of contexts. And the fact that it comes into play untapped makes this a card that will see play in some 2-color decks and many 1-color decks. I've already put this in 3 decks. I've put it in Murmuring Mystic, Passageway Seer, Corpse Augur. It's a good card. This also plays really well with Ghost. So if this is in play, you tap 4 essentially and draw a card with Ghost when you attack. Draw an extra card. So it's kind of like a Bonder's Ornament. It's a lot like a Bonder's Ornament. So yeah, that is the end of the list of Brothers War preview cards that I think are going to be good at common. So the next thing that we're going to do is look at the uncommon creatures. And interesting. Okay, so the uncommon creatures, type creature, there are a couple that are appealing, like that seem to have very immediate use cases, and the one that we're going to look at here first is going to be Skyfisher Spider. This card is so good. This card is really, really good. When it ETBs, you may sack another creature. When you do, destroy target non-land permanent. Wow. There's so much to say about this. It's not an amazing body. It's just a 3/3. But the fact that this is destroying almost anything, I mean, it just opens up slots in your deck. And it means that you can always threaten to like harm your opponent's stuff if it becomes a problem. The fact that it has reach is a nice bonus. It's in Golgari, which is like objectively amazing colors to have this effect in. Golgari is going to give us some of the best fodder in the format to sacrifice to. And then it just has like this random bit of flavor text where you gain life for creatures in your graveyard. And I mean, it's very strong. Putting putting life gain on these black mid-range commanders is really, really good. It helps offset one of the ways that we get punished for playing a powerful color, which is black. And that is that a lot of our draw spells actually, take away life. And that does add up, and you do have to have ways of mitigating it. So not only does this deck mean that we don't necessarily have to have cards like Broken Wings or like a Seal of Cleansing. I think there's the green one has a different name, but it basically has that effect. It's a naturalize in our deck is really good. It's really, really good. It also means that we're just like passively sort of buffering our life total with this card. So very excited about this. The ETB is very strong. Nothing is safe from it. And it's in Golgari, which are great colors for just this format. It's great colors, but it's also just very good in general. This is a generically good commander that I will be playing a lot of. I will be playing a lot of this. And the funny thing is that I was on the verge of building Ravenous Chupacabra for cPDH, which is 2/2 black, 2/2, enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls. I was going to build this just to have a removal spell in the command zone that was unconditional. But then we got Skyfisher Spider, which is just better. You do have to sacrifice another creature. That's not a problem. It literally doesn't matter in this deck. Because now we can pop stuff like Righteous Aura, we can pop Pestilence, we can pop a Whisper Silk Cloak, an Ashnod's Altar. I mean, sky's the limit. There's a lot of problematic permanents out there, and this kills them all. So, very excited about this card. I will be doing a Let's Brew video on this one I think it'll be on Thursday. Then we have Battery Bearer. And Battery Bearer, this card is like really, really busted. I expect to lose to this quite a bit. Yeah, creatures you control make mana. This is like Cryptolith Rites, in a sense. They're all Power Stones. They can make mana for artifact spells. Making artifact spells that are 6 value or greater might not be as common, but this is like a huge ritual. You could make really huge mana. So yeah, I don't know exactly what this one does, other than it seems like an amazing dramatic reversal deck. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of them, and actually dramatic reversal and retraction helix. If you have this in play, you can make infinite mana rocks with looping and draw infinite cards by looping something like Mirror Enforcer or Sojourner's Companion, which is great. So this is like a win condition. It's like just generically good to be like ramping with the creatures that we put into play. Like say we have like creature tokens, but it's also an opportunity to like draw your whole deck if you start using Steelfin Whale, Retraction Helix, and Mirror Enforcer. So that's pretty dang cool. And then also our dramatic reversal is going to generate huge tracts of land, quantities of mana. And it's a 3/4, so it's like not as vulnerable as some other creatures out there. Some other ones that we're going to look at too, Hero of the Dunes. I don't know exactly what I want to do with this. The person, if you are interested in this commander, that you should talk to is Morgana on the Tryhards Discord server, who has mentioned this card as something that they're interested in. Morgana mentioned that this is getting back artifact or creature cards with mana value 3 or less when it ETBs. That means you can get Ashnod's Altar back. And it's bringing it right back to the battlefield. So this has the same text as Recommission, but attached to an ETB. It's also giving our creatures +1/+0, which is great, because that means that we could potentially have like a combo and a combo-less kind of approach to this deck, where we still have like a reasonable beatdown plan with maybe tokens or things of that nature. Plus the art is very cool. Very cool art. So those two definitely interesting. We have Philagi Vanguard. This probably is a reasonable aggro commander. It's not awfully expensive. And if you are casting something like Battle Screech, this gets so out of hand. Like you just have one. Say you have like two creatures. Say you have some birds in play, and you go raise the alarm, and then you like flashback Sen's Enlistment. You're giving your board +8/+0 spread out along as many creatures as you want that you can target with this effect. So this is pretty cool. And it's also when Philagi Vanguard comes into play. So you could do some flicker stuff to protect it, which is cool. So yeah, this is a cool one. I'm not hyper bullish on this one, but I think that somebody will find a good thing to do with it. Evangel of Synthesis, I don't know why I keep coming back to this card. It's just kind of like a 3/3 for 2 mana, but it does have an ETB loot, and it does have evasion. So I don't know what a person would want to do with this. Maybe it's some sort of like ninjas, mid-range or control, probably mid-range deck with ninjas and things, where this is like hard to block and it's got a cool ETB on it. And so you can return it back with ninjutsu. Kind of like a Baleful Strix that's a little bit more menacing and has a different ETB. Third Path Iconoclast. This card has been talked about ad nauseum. This is just such a powerful effect to have in our format. This is better than Young Peasy or Young Pyromancer, except that it's just in 2 colors, which means it's a little more specific mana requirements, but it's making artifact creatures and it's making them on non-creature cast, which is so strong. And it's an Izzet, which is like, wait, so Third Path Iconoclast can be built in so many different ways. You can build this as a combo deck if you wanted to, that just like made blockers. You can build this as a aggro deck that makes a ton of attackers and then buffs them up with like Trumpet Blast or that type of effect, or maybe even like something gross like Rites of Initiation, where you like swing with like a bunch of 1/1s and they have like one blocker, and then you're like Rites of Initiation, discard 6 cards, you're dead. They're also soldiers, not super relevant in this case, but the artifacts are relevant. It means that you can use stuff like Mirror Enforcer, Sojourner's Companion, Steelfin Whale, that type stuff to basically cast them for free. You're just getting like free 4/4s because of the artifacts. The artifact element of it is huge because it also means that it's not just Impact Tremors that's good in this deck, and it's not just Witty Roastmaster, but it's also Ingenious Artillerist and Reckless Fireweaver. It's just a disgusting commander with so many different ways to build it that if you brought this to a league, your opponents are going to really struggle to know exactly what you're doing, because you could just switch it up. You can play any combo you want in here, whether it's Retraction Helix or, just 2 Drake stuff. I mean, it's kind of weird to say that, but like a combo deck that can produce a lot of bodies to protect itself is an exciting concept. I already have a list for this that I'm working on. This will be probably another Let's Brew stream as well. So very cool card, very good, very powerful. Being that it's in blue instead of just red and it's non-creature, it's just a huge upgrade. The last one that I'm going to talk about is Yoshin Tactician. Again, I'm this is kind of like the Boros one. I'm not saying this is going to be an amazing commander, but it is a lord for a creature type that we actually have a lot of good. We have a lot of good soldiers in Pauper at common, and we've gotten more. So this being a lord for that is interesting. Being that it's in blue means that we're kind of playing an aggro deck or a mid-range deck maybe that actually can draw cards and can actually protect its assets in multiple ways. So this one's pretty cool. And then the last one, last one we're going to talk about is Junkyard Genius. And I don't know that this one is exactly my flavor, but I've had some people suggest that it could be good because it's creating the food that it needs, it's ramping, and then it's also giving us the sack outlet and the payoff all in the same card. It is a 2/2, which worries me, and the sacrifice effect, while it's omnivorous for creatures or artifacts, it's not that good. Oh, wait a second. This is other creatures. This is all of your creatures. Oh, no, that's really good. Okay. Yeah. I like this a lot more already, actually. Yeah, creatures you control get menace and +1/+0. That's pretty sick. It doesn't give itself that, but we're probably not going to swing with it anyways, since we don't want our opponent to profitably block it and kill it. So, yeah. So, anywho, those are the commanders and the common rarity cards that I think are likely to see play in cPDH. And there was one more, right? The blue, yeah, Urza Powerstone Prodigy as well. But it's this one's already been talked about quite a bit. So these are the ones that I think are going to see play. Some of the ones that I think are really good, that are likely to be played in cPDH. And yeah, so is there any questions? Anyone in chat there has any feedback? Once again, thank you for joining the stream today. I hope you enjoyed all the content, and if you did, take a moment to leave a like and subscribe if you'd want to see more. That really helps us support the channel, helps you support the channel, and helps me keep me motivated to continue making good stuff. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed that. Next stream is going to be, I believe, on Thursday, and that one is going to be either Skyfisher Spider, or it'll be tuning and reducing the number of cards in the third path Iconoclast. So yeah, for now, I admit I am really, really tired and kind of ready to get like an early bedtime. Unfortunately, my grandpa is a bit sick right now and kind of on decline. So today I went and saw him and was feeling kind of like emotionally drained from that. And so we toughed it out for the video, for the stream today, for you all. And but you know, I need to kind of respect my emotional health and kind of leave it at that. So yeah, thank you all for sticking around. Appreciate your attention and your time today. Leave that support. Any feedback you've got too is always welcome in the comments. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.